let's get the meeting started. I'll
Back and
entertain
Ernie?
a motion to
How are you?
open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. Hey, Tim.
Good evening, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Right at there.
It is, yeah. It's
Oh, look at
very
that.
well lit.
Netflix? This is Netflix.
So, the first item on the agenda is your presentation to us. As I said in my email, if we could try to keep that as close to 15 minutes as possible, that would be great. I wanted to give ourselves some time later on to do a little mini workshop with some of the questions that Finance Committee have. So that's the basic agenda for tonight, I guess. So if you're ready, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us. We've been before you at least twice in the past month in joint meetings and TRICOM meetings and various settings. We have a $68 million budget. We have $2.1 million in new revenue for fiscal '21. The requests were a little bit more than $1 million over the estimated revenue for fiscal '21, so we had to make reductions throughout. In terms of revenue, we have $550,000 estimated for new growth. Part of it's inside that $2.1 million. So the initial requests, as I said, were $1.2 million over. The school department's request was $2.1 total, which equaled all of the new money that's available under those scenarios of both new growth, what's allowed under the levy limit, the marijuana revenue that we're estimating. And I will tell you, we've had talks with two of the MJ Market and Resonate, even as late as today, relative to their goal of opening. Their goal of opening is June. I think one is unrealistic in that they both started at CCC, but one of them has not started with planning yet. So MJ Market has not started. I encouraged them to do that today. So they were supposed to reach out to Chris today as a result of that text exchange we had. We're also carrying $130,000 for a SAFER grant. At minimum, we think we get $130 from that request. We're hoping for more, but that would fund the fire chief.
Excuse me,
So-
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we wait till he's completed it, or should we ask questions as he goes along?
No.
Wait till he's done? Okay.
Let him do his presentation, then we'll do our
Okay.
workshop.
So we had to reduce from the request, $590 from the school department. That was, the number after we were able to get a 0% increase for our health insurance. So that freed up $230 that we pushed right back to the district. And the town reductions were $568, $122. So it is balanced as of right now inside the levy limit. I don't know if there's $2,000 in the levy limit. 10,000. So we get extremely tight and extremely close to that number every year. So any adjustments in new growth or additional revenue or lack thereof will have to be dealt with in October. We do manage month to month both revenue and expenses to make sure we're on par with what we think we're going to collect, whether it's state aid, motor vehicle excise tax, taxes, fees, building permits. We generate reports monthly that I review, Becca reviews. We make sure we're on track to collect the dollars that we think we're going to collect. And we have a pretty good track record of making sure that expenses as well as revenues targets are met on a monthly basis. I don't know what you have on the next slide, Becca. Yeah, the things we did to get to that 560, 540, 568, 211, well, all these things across all departments. They're meaningful at the time you're making those adjustments, but I don't know if it's worthwhile to cover all of those at this point. But we shared that with the board last night, and I think, rounding out the discussion relative to new money, it's about allocation or reallocation of wealth, right? We're really talking about $68 million and what the priorities are inside that $68 million. I'm of the premise that, 6 months ago, we decided what the priorities were for the 65 million we were gonna spend. Now we need to set priorities for the extra $2.5 million we're gonna spend in fiscal year '21. So, having said that, the board and people in the meeting last night certainly advocated strongly to look at revenues in terms of an override. And I think the board is seriously considering that option to offset any of these reductions that we're considering, even further ones that we might have to make if we wanted to fully fund any other request. But the board, I think, might come to that resolution during the joint or TRICOM meeting on the 6th of March for a May ballot question.
Okay.
That's what I took away from the meeting last night.
You mean
6th
the
or 5th?
5th of March.
Yeah, whatever the date
6th, I
is.
can make it.
6th is my birthday, and it's not on my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh, my son too.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Big
as well.
day.
So the budget book is electronic, it's online, it was updated twice in the past 5 days.
Yep.
We had some adjustments, we had someone on vacation who is part of the sewer department. We had talked to the sewer commissioners about their indirect cost and how much they pay
Becca, could you put that back?
based on enterprise funds have to be fully funded by their own money, so they have offsets that they pay us as well as their debt service. So we adjusted that. Paul was on vacation. We had a meeting with him yesterday, or the day before. We made that adjustment. So that was one of the emails that went out early on. And then last night, there was a graph or a chart problem in the budget book where we had a spike in one of the out years. It was a snapshot, but wasn't reflective of the true estimated revenue for, fiscal '22 or '23. So we had to, adjust that chart, and I think you made that fix today.
Not updated.
She told me she was doing it, so.
It needs to match the projection.
So we've only received one other update. We only received one update from you.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't do the chart update,
chart-
but the chart has no impact and no bearing to the budget. It's just an update to the book.
Okay. All right, so it's only when we're making budget adjustments that we actually get a new version?
Yeah, because
Got
there'd
it.
be no reason, yeah.
Okay.
The book lays out the same way it always has. There's 8 tabs, there's appendices, there's backup documentation. There are some things that the GFO recommended we include in there. The narratives are pretty self-explanatory. There's not a lot of dollars across any particular category of expenditures that we have, from public safety to DPW. They're very, very small. And we're fortunate because we have a volunteer fire department that keeps that number extremely low. And of course, we don't pay if there aren't any calls, so if calls are down, you have to turn back inside the fire department, which is always good for, more free cash or more stabilization that you can add to.
Got it.
So that's really the budget in a nutshell.
Okay. So, if anybody in the public would like to make any comments, now's your time. After this, we're gonna close the public hearing, and then we're gonna have a budget workshop. So Finance Committee has gone through the budget, the proposed budget that we received about a week ago. We've put together a list, which you should have in your hands, of concerns that we have and questions based on that budget. I'll allow another period of time after the workshop if anybody wants to comment publicly as well. So is there any commentary at this point? Yeah, come on up.
Angelina Correa, 11 Christopher Drive. My question would be this chart here. When we look at the school side, they're cutting positions. This doesn't actually tell us what, like, if this said fiscal year 19 for all of these line items, fiscal year 20, and then what the request was, like, you can request a huge amount and then cut, but that's not real. So I guess for consistency or clarity, to have the prior year numbers for all of this would give us more of an idea of what that actually means, that those things were cut. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have it on this sheet, but we have certainly 19's request and 19 funding. So it's in the document if you want to pull out and go to police and say, what was it in 19 versus 20, and what is it versus 21 versus 20?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's in the big budget book. Has all of that comparison and percentage changes.
Well, because that line on the bottom says total reductions to town budget, 568,000. You didn't cut the budget 568,000, you cut the requested budget 568,000, because your actual budget went up 4.3%.
That's correct.
Overall. So it's a little, I don't want to say disingenuous, but it's a misnomer to say that you reduced the town budget, or the school budget, for that matter, by 540,000, or the town budget by 568, because you didn't. The budget went up 4.3%, so you didn't cut the budget, you reduced the request.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be clear, because I'm hearing people saying we cut the budget. That's not a cut, it's a 4.3% increase, right?
Right, and I talked to Jay about that specifically. He doesn't do his budget the same way. So he doesn't start with all of the requests and then have an approved budget and consider that to be budget cuts on the educational budget. The way that Jay does it is he comes up with a request that's based on level service. And he's already cut, when he makes his request to you, he's already made those reductions. So just as an example, and we can get into this in the workshop a little bit more, but I put together a list of all of their staffing requests for FY20. These are all of the positions, and the great majority of these didn't get filled, but these weren't included in his request. He cut these already going into the budget year. So there's
when
a
he-
fundamental difference in the way that Tim and Jay do their budgets.
Okay. I want to understand that, because
Jay doesn't track his requests to cuts.
So when Jay, and I'm sorry, somebody's up there, this is a public session, but when Jay presented his budget, he said he needed to eliminate 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever the number was. I understood that to be current positions within the budget that are currently funded in FY20
Yes.
will be reduced in FY21.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's a reduction in the level service. The budget may be going up, but some of that money's going to sped, it's going to whatever it's going to. Teacher
Salary.
contracts, salaries.
Yep.
Whatever. So I guess my question to Tim is I couldn't tell, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I didn't see any reduction in positions in the municipal side of the budget. To me, you've kept your budget level serviced, and you've grown it in some areas, which we'll talk about, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Kyle Morn, 9 Danielle Drive. I have two questions, one around revenues and one around expenses. And so the first question, expenses one, is probably more difficult, but what process was performed to review these line items? And specifically, I would call out sort of the library line item. So I just more so, less focus on the dollar amount, but it is a large dollar. So I'm trying to understand, what did you folks do to understand, review, and justify the expenses the library is incurring? You know, a $900,000 budget, 12 FTEs, almost your third largest, base, if you will, in the budget item. That was my first question, and less focused on the number, more focused on what you did to get comfortable with that number.
For the expense for the library,
Yeah, and I just don't know what goes through
yeah,
that
no,
number.
the department head makes a request, they put all of the detail in the budget request. And then we decide, what's the best way to do this based on the programming that they have. And the library board of trustees has staffing requirements for line of sight and patron care, and having 2 people on each level of the library, not, in this case, because we're not in the same building, but what we're asking for is for the last 3 months of the fiscal year, is to have 2 positions in anticipation of moving in to the new building. One is a custodial staff, and the other is some type of library assistant or aide, circulation desk, in terms of the need and the footprint of the new building going in, that added staff. I think they requested more than we funded.
Staffing was reduced through the budget process, which is just meetings, routine meetings, with the department heads, Tim, myself, board members, whoever wants to be involved with.
Yep.
No, that's helpful, and I asked the question because I would rather reduce the library budget than fire teachers. So that's where I was going, if you look forward into your deficit. That was the first part of my question, so thank you for that. The second part of my question would be revenues. So as I listen to folks, and just, I'm novice to this, so bear with me. You know, you have a growing liability, you have growing expenses, and you have constraints that the state imposes on you. You know, Prop 2.5, and investments less than 1 year tenor. So you're sort of constrained, you know, from a town budget stance. What are your thoughts, or what have you contemplated around diversification of revenues? Grafton being really solely focused around residential property tax. I mean, what are your thoughts around what you're hoping to achieve in the future?
I have 7 priority development sites throughout the town, mostly on Route 30. Those fully developed, there's about $1 billion, which would be an added 40% increase to the overall tax, and diversify that tax base pretty significantly. So 8 Pine, for example, that is a mixed-use development. We changed the zone for that. It's a state hospital. We're out to bid now for that. It should yield almost 200 units of development, both commercial and rental with an affordability component. That could be an upwards of $200 million project. Right on Route 30, on the other side of the street at Institute, there's 40 acres that the state of Massachusetts carved off under the Open for Business initiative, the governor's proposal. It went from DCAM property to mass development, and that's a site that can potentially have over 200,000 square feet of space. And obviously, the gem along Route 30 would be the Tufts property for the Science Park, which is pre-approved as Grafton as a bioplatinum-ready community for a 660,000 square foot facility. A couple impediments with that is there's legislation when it was transferred from the state hospital to Tufts that they do 100-year leases, but what we found is a Fortune 100 doesn't want to lease land for 100 years, they want to own the land. So trying to remove those impediments when we have those site selectors come before us to have those discussions, because we've added infrastructure on Route 30 from electrical capacity, storage, so we are poised and ready to take those developments on. So those are 2, obviously, Wyman Gordon, the 29 acres that are out front there, that's to be redeveloped. Warren Buffett bought that division of Precision Casting 3 years ago, maybe 4, and they want to divest some of their real property interest. So that's probably $100–150 million development once they had to break off the water line, because they had to make sure they have infrastructure for their existing 1 million square foot facility, and then able to provide that same level of service for fire protection on the front parcel once it gets sold. So those are just a flavor of the things that would diversify the income. The marijuana piece, I know people are nervous about the 360 we're carrying. You know, I don't think we get all of it, but I don't think we get none of it. So I know it's hard to kind of contemplate, but we will get some of that 360. And as I stated at the beginning, you know, we run a $68 million operation. We get expense reports, we see revenue, we manage that. You know, Mark can tell you, if 9C cuts came out in August from the state of Massachusetts, you're not gonna call a town meeting to adjust the budget. You're gonna stop spending because you're not gonna get those revenues from those 9C cuts. So we manage that. That's what we do every day, is to manage those costs. If we don't see the revenue coming in, we have to pull back.
Yep.
So we have an interim relief valve, if you will, to offset any of those catastrophic events.
That's
So
helpful.
Kyle, just some additional commentary on that, I guess. Economic development in Grafton is, it happens in lots of different areas. It's not like Tim's sole responsibility to do that. So the reason that we're in a position today to bring in cannabis revenue is because the planning board worked very early in the process to get our bylaws updated in town, to be able to update the use tables, and they worked with residents, giving them lots of options for what types of cannabis do we want and where do we want them in town. And, you know, there was a sort of a cafe of options that were brought before town meeting. That was a tremendous amount of work that went in to that. And the whole intention of it was basically to make Grafton more attractive and ready for accepting new revenue. We did a study to see if there was a possibility for us to put a hotel anywhere in town, and to see if that was something that we could market. A couple of years ago, we brought on economic development coordinator, so, you know, his sole focus really is on economic development. So we're constantly working with the state to do infrastructure improvements for, you know, streetscaping and sewer in some of these key areas. It's very slow work, though, and, you know, it's something that it is something that's discussed in every year, particularly in the election cycle, as well. Why can't Grafton just get more revenue? We have to get more business, and that's true, but it's a very long process. It takes many, many years to get those big developments to actually happen. And even when we get the big developments, typically there are tax incentives for those businesses. So we don't even see the revenue for some of these, you know, opportunities for a few years after the business is actually opened. It's really challenging, and there's plenty of developable property along Route 9 and lots of surrounding towns that have higher traffic counts. So there's only certain types of businesses that want to come into Grafton with our road infrastructure and the types of available property we have and all of that. So,
Yeah.
but nobody should think that everything that can be done isn't being done, because it really is, in my opinion anyways. There's a lot that's going on, and it's really front of everybody's mind, because you're right, we have very strict tax caps in Massachusetts that we can't exceed. So our only opportunity as a town to help with that is on the revenue side, so it's challenging.
Can I add to that?
course.
I just want to add that there also is not solely a focus, even though it's going to be a much smaller slice of pie, on getting big projects. One of the things the Economic Development Coordinator has done is try to make sure that our small businesses are thriving and have a good environment, because even though it's a small little piece of property, if you've got a business that's open and profitable, you're going to get more tax revenue than if you've got an empty lot. So there has been a fair amount of focus in making sure, again, that we are hospitable to and helping our small businesses thrive.
It just hit me, because I know what you're driving at. It just hit me, and Mark would know this better. The levy doesn't care whether it's residential money
Right.
or it's commercial money.
That's right.
The levy doesn't go up any higher than 2.5%, regardless of how, if I had $2 billion of commercial, the only thing that does for us as residential, we pay a little less in taxes. I don't get any more money. So I just hit me when you were talking, and when you added to that, we can build all those things out. Once we get all the new growth and that levy hits its max again, it's at its max.
There we are.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's it. As residents, we'll all pay a little less, and the
Yep.
tax rate will go down, and those commercials will pick up that cost. But once it's done, it's done. But I would argue that if you did get to, if we have 2.7 billion in overall value, if you got to 3.5, and it's a 70-30 split, you would talk to the Board of Selectmen about splitting the rate.
Sure,
between
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Commercial and residential classes. And then that burden shifts more to commercial and less to the residential class. That's diversification, but that.
You also discourage new business, though, by taxing heavier
You
on
can,
that side.
but in terms of the location of Grafton, land values, traffic counts, proximity, there's a lot of things going. So you gotta find the balance. You
Yeah.
can't just do it just to do it, but you have to find that balance.
So
We're not there. We're 28% away from that number.
Absolutely.
So I was really, another part of my question to your point was, you know, on this slide with the reduction scenarios, my question was trying to achieve, are your numbers baked into these reductions? Meaning if those items, those development items come to fruition, do these numbers change on a positive
I
basis?
don't know what that document is.
Oh,
That's a finance committee document.
okay. Well, ask the finance committee then. If those development items come to fruition for the town, do these numbers get better?
So
Yes.
Tim bakes in an estimate on
Yeah.
new growth every year. I mean, generally pretty conservative. I mean, Tim can speak to it, I don't know.
What are you carrying, 550 this year?
Yeah.
Yep.
But the answer is, nothing's going to happen that's going to change that for fiscal year '21. So if that's what you're looking for, the answer is no.
Right. In fact, Finance Committee has some concerns with the revenue budget assumptions as they are, and we'll get into those in the workshop, and Tim alluded to those already with the, you know, the cannabis sales money. But also, you know, the big cost drivers in town are sort of external cost drivers. It's things like health insurance, and, you know, Tim, it's a bear to do,
I bet.
but he's redone our town health insurance a couple of times over the last 5 years, and, you know, it's one year savings that you get typically, and then the next year it goes up, you know, typically double digits or, you know, close to it. So, but for those big cost drivers that we have some control over, we're managing those things as well.
And my final thought, I promise I'll be quiet and leave, is,
You don't have to.
investment income is my background. So when I think about investment income, it seems to be on the decline if I read through properly on the budget. But, and given the constraints the state imposes on what you're allowed to invest in,
Yep.
has it ever been discussed a different solution on investment income? And I'll give you one scenario. You build a asset management firm, investment management shop to invest for you, but you don't take the town's money and invest, you buy equity in the asset manager, and they dividend back to you, back to the town. I don't even know if that's legal.
There's
I'm
strict
just,
rules on municipal investments, and you have to follow certain guidelines, so you gotta be, I don't think you
Yeah.
can do exactly what you're talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim.
No, I mean, you have a legal list for general stabilization for those investments. But let's answer your first question. We actually have an increase last year and next year projected for investment income, because we've had borrowing, and we can't earn money in arbitrage, and we have an IRS issue where you bought tax exempt bonds, I made money on your money because I didn't do the project. That, I can't do that because you're gonna have a tax burden. So I sell tax exempt bonds, so you can, you know, I'll enjoy 1.5%, 2% interest for my projects, but I can't use that money to earn more than what my interest costs would be. So you know all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I borrowed more for library, DPW, as we go, and I spend that down, but I'm still earning interest on that money. So that's why that number is actually going up.
got it.
In our projections in 22, 23, 24, I'm not borrowing any more money, so I'm not earning as much because I don't have as much money to invest. But the legal list, you know, we have a, Bartholomew is our, you know, most municipalities use Bartholomew for investments. The trust funds, some of the trust funds are prudent investor rules, so we can do things a little bit more aggressively with OPEB for that trust fund. But for strictly stabilization, it's the legal list, and whatever the state says is on that list, that's what you do.
Got it. Yeah, and I was reading that, so,
Yeah.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and we do have a financial advisor that's sort of constantly reviewing our investment portfolio, seeing if we can refinance bonds and,
Yeah.
you know, whatnot, so,
No,
you know,
I understand the constraints.
right, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Good question.
Kyle, thanks for coming, and, you know, just to hit on one more thing, you know, we're talking about like how to get more revenue, and land takes time, but, you know, if you're looking for quicker solutions, to me, the only place that you can look is in the State House. Things need to change there, in terms of taxation throughout the Commonwealth and how that gets distributed to towns. So I would encourage you to reach out to the state rep and senator to learn about their thoughts and what could happen there. As an example, I think there was a ballot initiative maybe a year or two ago to impose a tax on income over $1 million. It got struck down by the state Supreme Court because, I don't know, I think the language wasn't correct, but that would still be legal for the State House to pass a law like that. And I think towns like Grafton could benefit from something like that. And that happens much quicker than trying to develop, you know, a 26-acre piece of land. So definitely look into the state aspect of it too. And again, thanks for coming.
Any other public commentary? Okay. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
So Matt, in the workshop, can we go through revenues first and then expenses, or is that a good way to do it?
And the first page is FY '21 revenue concerns.
I like that.
Yes.
Look at that. It's as if you read my mind.
So, Tim, I have to apologize, and Becca, it was not my intention to not get this to you, but it wasn't put together until about 5 minutes before the meeting, so it is what it is. So the first area that we wanted to go over is on the revenue side of things. So we've got some, basically some high-level concerns with some of the budget assumptions that we have. The two main ones, I think, are the cannabis revenue and the grant for the fire chief, and then we have some additional questions, more questions and concerns, things that we need clarifications on as far as licenses or permits and investment income. So the big concern is obviously the cannabis revenue. The committee feels that it's just not a plausible scenario that we recognize so much revenue from cannabis sales within the fiscal year. And just, we don't have any shops that are open right now. We have some aggressive planning, and we have some aggressive development that's happening, and we have businesses that have a great desire to open and start making money. But we're all very uncomfortable with putting that revenue into the budget at this stage of where we're at. There's been no approval from the CCC. We have started planning with one of the businesses, but it's not completed, it's not approved. The 360,000 represents, I think it's $6 million in sales. That's a huge number, even.
12.
I think it's 6, but regardless, it's a
Remember,
huge.
some of it's tax and some of it's under the host community agreement, so there's a
Yep.
pilot in place. So that's a blended number.
So that 360, how much of it is the host agreement? Because that's guaranteed money. You're gonna
Yeah.
get that. How much of that 360 is that?
Off the top of my head.
I think it's 60,000.
60? So I
much
think
did you say?
60,000 to count on 60,000 makes a lot of sense. I agree with you 100%. The 300,000, I think, the extra 300,000, I think is a concern. I know what you said about the 9C cuts, but that's when something comes up because all of a sudden there's a downturn in the economy and the state's not collecting their sales tax or whatever as much as they want. I'm uncomfortable, Tim, going into a budget year knowing we're gonna have a $300,000 problem, and then all of a sudden, you're 3-4 months into the year and you have to start reducing the budget. You say you're gonna freeze the budget. 80% of the budget is salaries. So all those salary increases go into effect July 1st, and now, so a big portion of your budget is already being spent. So now all of a sudden you have to find $300,000. Seems to me you're not gonna be able to freeze expenses that much. Now you're looking at, are you gonna start laying people off halfway through the year? Why start out the year with a deficit when you know it's gonna be a deficit?
So you want me to cut the budget further than it's been cut?
I personally think, after looking at your revenues, that your budget is out of balance by about $500,000 based on a couple of factors. That 360, well, now it's 300. And then the SAFER grant, the $130,000 for the fire department. When were you planning on hiring the full-time chief? Before you got the SAFER grant or after you got the SAFER grant?
Probably after, because I don't have any money for it. So
Okay.
I want to get the grant first, but I'm going to try and be on a dual track, going through the search process to hire someone.
And when's the grant due?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
So are we gonna appropriate that $130,000 at the Springtown meeting?
Yes,
Seems to-
and it's inside the revenue calculation, so it'd be to
Well-
raise and appropriate.
But you don't have it yet.
That's correct.
Okay, so I don't think you should fund it in May. I think you should wait until the fall to fund it if you have the grant by then. Because you have to have a balanced budget, and now you're gonna go back into October, and you're gonna have to reduce the budget by $130,000 if you don't get the grant. And my question is that SAFER grant a 3-year? Is that how it works? It's a 3-year grant?
I forget how Charlton broke it up. It was either 3 or 4, and it was for personnel and equipment,
Yep.
depending on need, so.
Okay, so if you get that, but I was concerned at first when I saw that if you get a $130,000 grant for just fiscal year '21, now all of a sudden fiscal year '22, you're starting with a $130,000 deficit, but it's spread out over 3 years? Okay. But anyway, I'm concerned about that SAFER grant, and I'm concerned about the marijuana
And
money.
you
What's-
gotta- But you answered the question, right? If you don't get the grant, you don't hire the person, so I don't have the expense.
Well, then why appropriate until you have the grant? Don't go into, because to me, you're going into town meeting with a budget that's out
It's
of
a $68
balance.
million budget. I mean,
I understand that.
We could manage the 130. We have we have other tools, right? We have fees, we have bag fees that we could increase. There's things we could do. We could use Chapter 90 instead of using DPW funds. There's some flexibility.
So why don't we do that going in and have legitimate, realistic revenues?
Because
way you
I
balance
think
the
it's
budget?
realistic to say I'm gonna get the grant.
And-
That's just what
Okay.
I'm saying that I think we're going to get.
Well, you heard my concern.
Tim, is it 130 each year?
No, 130 is just a number we're holding just for the chief's salary. We'd probably make application for 350, 360. The same company that did the study for our staffing study is actually making the application for the grant.
So
We're using those data points.
we don't even know what they would physically actually give us on
That's
an
correct.
annual
We
basis.
don't know.
But,
So what's the basis of your, I mean, if you're putting that revenue assumption into the budget, I would hope that you feel very confident that we're gonna get that grant.
Yeah.
What's the basis behind that level of confidence?
The company we retained to do the grant application has been successful in getting them before, and our community to the west, Charlton, they're full-time now, and they were able to do this with that same grant 3 years ago.
Who funds the grant?
I think it's a federal,
It's federal money.
yeah.
We've applied for that grant like five years in a row, and we haven't got it 5 years in a row, so it's a very competitive,
Oh, yeah.
it's a national
I
grant.
think the thing that we have going for us is we've been a call volunteer, no full-time staff ever, and we're the only one left. And to see the fact that we haven't had loss of life is a huge goal. It's a huge target we've hit, right? We've been really, really blessed. So I think those things are gonna play well for our application.
and can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
And I guess, are you concerned at all that this is a grant and you are using it for a salary position? So I don't know if it's like a grant that I'm assuming you'd have to reapply for, so what if you didn't get it again, and then?
We would fund it in the operating budget in 22, 23, 24. It would just be an ongoing piece. You have to remember the turnback, for example, based on call volumes and what we pay people to respond to training and to calls. The fire department, because we just don't know what that number is for those call volumes, can turn back up to $100,000. So even this last year, what was the turnback for the fire department?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
But now, won't that affect your free cash certification at the end of the year, so now you'll have less free cash? Because you count on that turn back from the fire department to fund your free cash, which you use to fund your capital budget.
I don't count on it. We work hard to keep all of our costs down, to increase that number, and to increase revenue to increase that number. But if something's budgeted, in my mind, it should be spent. And if it's not needed, it shouldn't be budgeted. That's our philosophy that we apply to the budget. But if we work hard throughout the year not to spend as much, and we can have a more robust turnback to have a better capital plan with the monies we have, that's what we do.
Sure. Go ahead, Colleen.
Has that company applied for the grant yet? And typically, how long between once it's been filed do you hear back?
No, we have not filed. We're going through, we have to get DUNS numbers, account numbers. There's a whole SAM account at the federal government that you need to create. So we're in that process now.
When do you think they will file by? Is that like months away, weeks away?
Once we get through this process, we'll make application once we have all the data points to answer all the questions in the grant application. Like I said, I don't even know the date off the top of the head for when it's due, but it'll be filed on the time that it's due.
Is the intention to have, like, if you got the grant, like, is the person starting on July 1st, or like when?
No, he said, he answered my question, I asked that. He said he's not gonna hire him until he has the grant.
But like,
Yeah, but if I had the grant, they told me on May 15th I got the grant, if that's the window, yeah, we would go forward with that process.
maybe rephrase Colleen's question. Do you know when you would hear back that it's a no?
No, I don't know.
Mark, when do you hear back that it's a no?
Tim, how did you
Just trying
arrive
to
at
think
the
when we get-
number of
it's usually in the
130?
July or August that we usually get the
Just
Just
notification.
for what
So
we
he'd
see
know
the
in the
market
fiscal
for
year.
our first year chief making.
And I noticed in the budget you had our call chief. Is that number in the 130 as well?
Mickey's gonna stay on until his retirement.
Right, I understand, but it's his money in that 130 that's in the budget.
It'll be in the
others,
fire
fires, fine, okay. All right,
Just like where the inspector is now and so forth.
okay.
So sorry, so basically your budget is, your revenues and your expenses are it's basically you have 130 in revenue and 130 in expenses, it's a wash. Is that what you're saying?
So, but didn't you just say before you're not expecting it the full 130?
I'm hoping for more. I'm holding out for the chief because the study said the first thing you need, well, the study said a lot of things, but the first thing we need is a chief, is a committee studying the study to make recommendations on more than just a chief to be hired in the fire department. So what I'm doing is just putting a placeholder, because I think I need the leadership first, a full-time man on the ground or woman, to say what the department needs going forward based on the study and the committee's recommendation. The application will be more for than 130, but right now, I just want to focus on the one person who can provide leadership and direction to the department. And that's 130, like I told Sue, is based on what the market is for first-year fire chiefs in the area.
But
And should that money come in, more of it, it can only be used for a fire department?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure, okay.
Specifically for,
So is the committee comfortable with the assurance that the position doesn't get hired if we don't get the grant?
I think the only way I'd be comfortable is if the money's not in the budget.
yeah,
I just heard Tim say that if it's in the budget, and we appropriate it, I'm gonna spend it. So I'm not comfortable putting that
I
in.
did
the-
not say that.
Oh, I thought
said
that's
if
what I
we get the
heard.
grant, we would hire the person. We don't get the grant, we will not hire.
No, not to that. You had said something, I'm sorry, I guess I misunderstood.
But I will
you.
tell you, the board shares your concern anyways. We talked about the 590, if you will, in terms of between these numbers and the marijuana money. So that'll be part of the override discussion. If we're not comfortable with that, then that would alleviate that.
Sure, I guess, one of the concerns that came up in our last meeting was that, you know, even if an override's proposed, there's no guarantee that we're gonna get one. So we could be in a situation where if we have put assumptions into the budget that have potential downside, and we don't get an override, then we're in a situation where the schools are laying off teachers, you've cut some out of your budget, and then we're going into the fall having to find potentially a few $100,000 more.
I would assume you'd have two budgets at town meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, if you're gonna go for an override, you're gonna have two budgets. You're gonna have a budget with an override and a budget without an override, and have town meeting vote both, and make a contingent, so that because town meeting's before the election, and if the override fails, then you already have a budget in place, you don't have to call another town meeting.
Correct.
But this
I mean,
is,
that's what we
but
did
this,
in
That's what you would do,
15
right?
for
Yeah.
50.
this budget assumes no override.
This budget now, which I'm saying it's out of balance by X amount of dollars because we don't believe those revenues. So we should not appropriate that at town meeting. We should come into town meeting with a legitimate balanced budget.
I agree with that.
That's my recommendation.
I don't feel comfortable with it being in there. We need a fire chief, and I think we'll get the grant, but I would just as soon not have it in the budget, just in case we don't. And I know you're applying for more than the 130,000, the 350,000. What would you use the rest of that money for?
To implement what the study recommends and what the committee.
Okay, so you can
Studying
use
the study
that's right.
recommends.
All right, so, okay.
All right, I think we've registered our concern with those two items.
One small question. The 300,000 tax revenue for cannabis represents about what amount in sales?
I would have to look at the numbers we did. I don't remember the number.
Do we know, is that like a 3% tax?
Yeah,
on-
there's a 3 and then there's a 1.5 for the the state. We voted to have the maximum allowable at town meeting, so
That's about 9 million in
It's
cannabis.
several $1 million, yeah.
Yep.
in sales. And the only one we had to go by that had more than a year's worth of data was Leicester.
Yeah,
So that's the one we had at the time we did the estimate.
right. Okay. Mark, you had some additional
Yeah,
concerns.
Tim, just on the investment income, you said at the beginning that you have capital projects, you're earning more interest because there's more money in the bank. You're spending that money now in fiscal '20, and is all the money borrowed for both those projects now?
No.
Okay. Because you're tracking at $48,000 in fiscal '20. You've gone through half the year and at $24,000, so 6 months, and you're budgeting $75,000 next year. What's the confidence level, and how did you get to that 75,000 number? Is most of the library money gonna be in there?
Library money will be fully borrowed money in May.
In May, perfect. That makes sense to me. Thank you. And under licenses and permits, you have $418,000, and you're tracking right now through 6 months, $360,000, so that's another $60,000. What's the confidence level in building permits being that much? What projects is there stuff before the planning board that you're,
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can bring up the planning board page and just show you the litany of completed from last year versus what's in the queue for right now. And the other things that we just know anecdotally that's, not a planning board or a ZBA related.
Okay.
There's plenty. The 40B on Prentice, even though people don't like the fact that that's going there, that'll generate some significant calls
Perfect.
for permits.
thank you. Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Let's go to the salary side of things. So that's on page 3.
Just one thing I think we forgot about, we talked about last night, for the cannabis revenue, like, whatever, that's tough to estimate, but one of the things we discussed was the host agreements are 5 years. Are we gonna be able to renegotiate that so we still get the percentage in perpetuity, or is it like 5 years and it's done? Cause our thought there was like, that's not really a recurring expense then if it's only a
The
5
tax
year.
continues on forever. It's the host agreement payment
The
that
host
doesn't.
agreement is only good for
That's a
5
state
years,
law.
but we do have a sentence in there about renegotiating for longer based on mutual interest.
Okay.
But the law only provides for a maximum of 5 years.
But the 3% tax, that goes on forever.
Yeah.
Right.
And most of your revenues is based on the
3%.
the 3%. yeah.
3%.
So the host revenue, I think you said was 60 grand. The tax revenue is 300 grand.
That's like
so-
the impact fee stuff.
Correct.
And the other thing with that was, according to the town's financial management policy that we have, which of course hasn't really been looked at in a while, so kind of doesn't really carry as much weight, but it does say that it says new recurring revenue sources shall be considered, first considered, particularly in the first year, toward meeting reserve level goals and capital needs before being utilized for funding general fund operating budget needs. So we were wondering if that was taken into consideration, and also the town will thoroughly analyze the expected stability of any new recurring revenue sources before appropriation. And I think the 5-year thing kind of is a big issue regarding stability.
Well, let's take your first question first. I mean, we think we have a financial crisis because the schools want $2.1 million, and we know we have $2.1 million of new money. So what's the goal? So, again, I mean, it's a strange anecdote that I give to Becker all the time. I don't save for my kid's college if I can't feed the kid, right? So I'm not gonna do those things because the priority is the school district. That's where the money goes. Always first. If I had anything left over, we would deal with all those other things. But there is no more money than the 2.1 million of new money for fiscal '21 that we have to decide how it gets divvied up.
And we don't think it's 2.1, right? Well, I don't think it's 2.1.
I think it is.
You think it is, okay.
And you guys can differ and have a discussion about it, that's fine. But it's 2.1. If it's lower, then we're all gonna get lower.
And the other thing was considering the stability of it. I think that's kind of the larger concern for us, is that we are kind of relying on it to fund these recurring needs that are only expected to increase. And we were skeptical that it'll even be as high as the 360,000 in the first year. And then we know after 5 years, it's at best up in the air whether we'll continue to have it. So that's just makes me really concerned to have that as something that we're relying on in the operating budget, especially for the schools, which I agree are the biggest thing that we do as a town. So.
Okay.
Can I ask one more revenue question? I'm sorry. The 11.2.
Last question.
I'm sorry. The 11.2, that's the governor's number?
Yes.
Can I just make it, You had said that we're in this financial crisis because of the school. I think at this point now, it isn't just the school anymore. I mean, we've been, we go through this every year, and our budgets are getting leaner and leaner and leaner, and we have eliminated some positions and given, more hours to somebody else. I mean, I think it's, the whole town is in a fiscal crisis. It's not just brought on by the school.
Yeah, if I said that, I apologize. I don't think it's a school-related item. It's a global, you have growth in expenditures. We all try to control as much as we can. Unfortunately, the largest budget will always have the largest percentage increase and always the largest dollar increase.
I don't disagree with that.
So 2.1 million of all the new money that you get, that's the exact request amount for one department.
Right.
It's not sustainable. So, I mean, there should be no, you're like, oh, we didn't know. We knew about it from 2010, when we started to
Well, we knew
contemplate
when we-
2014. So
Not everybody.
Right.
none of this can be surprising to anyone.
Well, it is. Unfortunately, there was fairly consistent commentary that we didn't have a problem and everything was going to be fine and we'd figure it out. And there was just a lot of commentary like that. And there wasn't a persistent recognition in each budget year that we were drawing down that extra levy capacity. So one of the things that I want to see is if we get an override proposed, that is something that's front and center at every town meeting, is actually tracking the drawdown of the levy and a recognition that because of the budget dynamics in Grafton, it's a pretty simple equation of, revenue and expenses. An override isn't a permanent fix for, our situation. It just isn't. It's disingenuous to not talk about it or not say that, or say that an override fixes everything. Because I think, a lot of the people that I talk with have just a misunderstanding that the override was meant to be a permanent fix for Grafton's financial situation, and it just never was. So anyways, that aside, the next thing that we wanted to talk through is around salaries. So there were a lot of concerns in the salaries, and I'm not sure that necessarily we have to go into every single one of them, but I did put them in the document in case we want to dig into them.
I think we should.
So I'll leave it up to the committee, how much it wants to get into, but I also want to be respectful of everybody's time. The big concern, I think, around salary is twofold. First of all, we have a situation where we have proposed cuts on the school side. And in the same budget year, we also have proposed increases on the town side. And so there's just a lack of, it appears that there's a lack of overall budget coordination between the town side and the school side. Because those, as much as I want a fire chief, if we don't get an override and we're cutting teachers, it doesn't make sense to me that we're also going to be hiring additional positions and also giving significant raises beyond that kind of 2% guideline that we have across the town. So it's just a lack of coordination across the two sides of the budget, and just a general lack of strategy and messaging around what is it that we're actually trying to do with this budget. It was one concern. And the other is, as we look across the various salaries, there are significant differences, variants in terms of the amounts that people are getting. And so this is something that comes up fairly routinely, I guess, in our conversations with the various departments. It doesn't look like there's a good plan for that, and a good set of criteria that are just an openly viewed set of criteria for how we actually manage people's salary ranges and in particular increases. And there's a particular focus on this year because we do have this financial situation that we're in. So those were sort of the two main things for us. And I wanted to talk through those. And before we get into all of the detail, the ask that the committee came up with last night is we'd like to see a policy for our non-represented personnel put together, and a plan put together, so that, you know, when we go into this budget process and have these discussions, that our experience of the budget is that not everything is very well explained. It seems like there is some potential arbitrary decision-making based on individual conversations and whatnot, and there isn't a consistent set of criteria that are applied across the board. So that's what, you know, that's what the ask from the committee is to see what a plan looks like, and to have a policy put together where if a taxpayer questions, why is this person getting 2% and that person getting 19%, that there's a
And I can explain that now if you want.
reasonable answer for that.
So first, we have a class and comp plan that we studied in 2012 for all of our positions. Might be a little stale, but the ranges were very wide at the time, so I still think they're good in terms of where people are at. You have transition in particular departments. You hire people at what they're willing to take. So if they take a lower wage, you get them in the door, that's a great thing. But when you realize you have to retain that knowledge, you have to pay competitively based on the market, and there's inequities even amongst departments, you have to make adjustments. So someone like the town clerk making $59,000 a year, who's asked me on a number of occasions, hey, I'm not even close to my peers, can we do something? There's never a good time to do it. So
Sure.
I've done that. I've done that for the Council on Aging. Those are tiny, small numbers, and one of the board members asked us, what if everybody got 2% versus what we're proposing here? First, all those people proposed are inside the range that was adopted by the board in terms of a comp and class plan, so there's a plan. Everybody's residing inside those numbers. And it's a savings of $32,000 if you didn't want to equitably pay those people. I will tell you, inside the school department, people are getting raises, right? So people in the admin staff and principals, from the bottom up, all are 100,000 plus year employees. 2% for those folks is a lot more than 2% for the person making 60 grand. So there may be cuts in the school in terms of what they're gonna do. They are getting increases as well. So let's not pretend that they're not.
I don't think that's what Matt said. I think he said, are we gonna keep it uniform at 2% across the board? You have some people getting 6.7%, some people getting 19%, some people getting 10%. You and I had this conversation, we sat down with our sustainability committee. I asked if there was a plan, or should we have a plan, and that was the answer that you gave. But I don't want to pit the town against the schools. The school budget is the school budget.
Well, we gotta
They have-
find parity too, though, right?
I understand that,
We need equity
but
between
they
the
have
two.
collective bargaining agreements, a lot of those
Let's
employees over
talk
there, don't
about
they?
parity, though,
The
for a
teachers
second.
do, yeah.
Yeah,
But
so-
the rank and file under Jay, they don't have individual employment.
And is he giving them all 2%?
If you look at the line items in the budget, some are 3.53, some of them are dead on 2.
Do they have a pay plan, though, that requires step increases and things like that for the non-unions?
I would have to ask Jay,
I think it's a fair point that he's bringing up. I want to see that. I want to see if.
I want consistency across the board. I guess there's different ways to look at parity, I guess. One of the things that I pulled, so on the last page is an appendix with the school comparison to other districts. If you look at their bachelor step 2, we're 7th out of 7 with sister communities. So they're under market. And if you go across the board and things get a little bit better with a lot of education on the school side,
But for teachers, right? What's
they're,
happening? Teachers?
yeah,
Yeah.
but they're not getting paid market, I guess is my
Sure.
point. So there's just a fundamental inconsistency in saying that everybody should be paid market rate when we have an entire sort of class of teachers. These are all the new teachers that are coming into Grafton that are significantly under our sister communities. So
But those are union contracts that Jay doesn't have any say in, right? Well, they negotiated it, they get steps, they get lanes, and they get increases. It is what it is if they're under market. What you're talking about is the administrators who aren't in a union.
Correct.
You're saying they're getting 3.5%.
In some instances,
Okay.
if you look at the line, that's what the number
So
carries.
what I want to know, and I know we have a little budget working group we're going to start, I want to look at consistency across the board. If they're-
Absolutely.
So he's right, it should be fair. However, I want to see consistency on the town side as well. I understand you have an issue, but there never is a good time to give a raise, but when you're projecting a $6.5 million deficit over 3 years, over 5 years, and then there's a 19% pay raise for one and a 6.7% pay raise for somebody else, it's the messaging, I guess, that's the problem. Listen, I'm in your shoes. I have people coming to me all the time asking for increases, and I want to be able to give it to them. But there's timing, I guess, Tim, and I don't think the timing is right in this particular
It
budget.
never will be, but I would argue that the retained knowledge of those people to stay here and not lose them, I mean, I'm not training a new town planner, but I have a new town planner. The information lost with Joe leaving, it's a strain on all of us to get the new guy who's great up to speed on every project that this town has, trying to get developed, to diversify revenue, to get more money to fund all the things we think are important. So
Yep.
losing that, there's a cost to not being equitable for people or not being competitive.
Is there a reason, I understand what you, like, you know, when you hire someone, you hope to hire them at a lower rate, but it seems like it doesn't matter if you hire at the lower rate because you're just gonna up their salary a year or two later. So is there a reason why you don't immediately hire them at market?
Yeah, it's cash flow and the ability to pay at that particular point in time.
But I don't
And
think
I
we
don't
have
have
the-
that compounding issue where I paid that money this year. I avoided that cost of $60,000 instead of $58,000, so I saved $2,000 for that year to do something else with.
But then it's like such a large chunk that you have to.
Yeah, so it's either you bite, like, we're having the same discussion right now, do we bite this all off now? Or I did it with Beth for 3 years in a row, it was in the budget, we talked about it at length. Beth was underpaid from a library perspective. We did a 3-year incremental increase for her. With the library board of trustees, kicked in half of what the town kicked in to get her to be
So could
commensurate
you
with her
do,
peers.
I know it's not big money, but could you do that with somebody like the town clerk? Do
I
it
don't have
over-
a funding source like the library trustees had.
But I don't know that we have the funding source now to, I mean, I understand what you're saying, I understand her argument, but it's like Mark said, we've all said, it's a tough year. You're saying you're increasing her salary because this is a year because we have the funds. I don't think we have the funds.
So if
Am I saying it?
32,000 is gonna make the difference?
No,
But it's not just 32,000,
Add
Tim.
up when
There
you
are
add it all
there are
up.
hour increases in here as well that total more than 32,000. You know, you're increasing hours at the library, you're increasing the HR, you're increasing hours in the treasurer's office. So there are hours.
Not in the treasurer collector's office. No hourly. increase.
Maybe I misunderstood something you wrote in your message then.
So can you show us the breakdown of that 32,000? All of the places where if they had only gotten a 2% raise, and so that we can check if we find them in other places and it might be a different number?
Sure.
I think, to me, the maybe, like, greater point here is, like, I get what you're saying, Tim. It's 32 grand in a $68 million budget. Like, what is that? Not even half a point. But I think it's an optics thing in an override year. You know, it's just tough.
Well, first of all, let's define that. Is it an override year? Is that what we're doing? Because I think the board's
Don't ask
moving
me,
towards
ask
it.
your bosses.
We're either we think we're gonna be positive about it, we're gonna budget for it, or we're gonna make more reductions. So I'm just trying to figure out, where do you want us to be?
Override year. I think override year. Like, that's what I think is very clearly the opinion we have on this committee.
I mean, I wouldn't speak for the
But-
committee.
I mean,
I think
the finance committee, quite honestly, has to be careful. You're a neutral third party, no dog in the fight. You're watch for the
Can you
taxpayer,
send that
you're
to
a
me?
watchdog for the taxpayer.
Okay,
No
thank you.
advocacy should happen from a financial standpoint, from the finance committee.
I'm quite
I mean,
aware
we-
of that.
So,
but
no, Sue, you've been here a long time, I know you know.
Don't say it like that.
But I just want us to know that you need to look at things from a neutral perspective.
And I understand that, and I think that looking at these budgets over the past couple of years and seeing us getting leaner and leaner, and you don't have to,
So-
make it a
Well,
political
So can-
thing,
can-
you could
can-
just look at the
hang on a sec,
actual
hang on a
thing.
sec.
Growing,
Time
we're
out,
not
time out, time out,
getting
time out,
leaner.
time out, time out, time out. Can we,
Doing more
We
with
hold
less.
off the conversation on the
Oh,
override.
Yeah, I want to follow up on something. Tim said there's no
let's
increase
get
in
through
hours in the
this.
treasurer's office. Can I
Yeah,
just
sure.
go to page 74 in your budget? Maybe I read this wrong. It says the treasurer collected personnel budget increases the collective bargaining agreement. There was also a slight increase in the part-time clerk's hours. You just said you didn't increase hours, but this says you did increase hours. Am I confused?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't recall increasing Christine's hours.
Oh, it's just what it says here, so maybe you didn't in the number, but I read that in your budget statement, so that's where my confusion came from.
So we'll get you a list of that kind of stuff. There was 3 or 4 places in going through the budget where the actual commentary didn't match what the numbers looked like. So for example,
Fire was a good one.
yeah, fire was a good one, and also the economic development director.
I think library we had a question on too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so, but let's hold off. We'll just send you a list of that stuff. That's just more language than anything, so.
I said one more. So just say the idea that there's never a good time, I think that's a fallacy, because there are better times and there are worse times, and we're not saying there's going to be a good time coming up soon. I think our concern was that this is a relatively particularly bad time, and to say there's no good times, I think that misses the point. So I just want to put that out there.
So Becca put this list up. These are the increases and the changes. Things that are over 2%, I think, are highlighted in gray. So we can walk you through those if you want to.
So some people got no raises, is that correct? Okay, so like EDC specialist, it's the same number in both columns. A lot of them are the same numbers in both columns, so how do you read that?
A handful of people are not getting an increase to their rate. One of them is a select board assistant, one of them is the EDC coordinator. I think that's it.
Well, it says town clerk was just hired, so there might be,
No, there's an increase later for him.
yeah, I know, on his
Yeah.
anniversary date.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you look on the left hand, the furthest to the left, that's it's the person, it's the individual staff member that we're talking about. What we're proposing in 21, and then if we were to cap it at 2%. So the numbers match because they're either getting 2% or there's not gonna be a rate change, but there is an increase due to hours, or in the case of the select board administrator, when we estimated a number in FY '20, we didn't hire that person until after the beginning of the fiscal year. We hired her at a higher rate than what we were carrying. She has a lot of experience with CPC. Her hours are gonna be offset with CPC hours, cause she does CPC work while she's here with us, and those hours will be offset. So we're carrying, if she were to work every hour that she's scheduled for at her current rate, we need to increase the budget by $4,000. It's not an increase in her rate, it's not a change in hours, it's just an adjustment based on our estimate from the beginning of FY '20 and what happened when we actually hired her in the middle of FY '20.
So is there a revenue on the?
Hold on, I think they'll turn back money in that, because I think that CPC money will offset enough. So we're not gonna need the full 25,000, but we don't know yet how many CPC hours she's going to work in the fiscal year, so I can't bank on that money and then not have it come in and not, you see what I'm saying? So that's just for the select board assistant. Mark, you were gonna ask a question?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rebecca, and I apologize, but, so, you're budgeting 25, you're not sure if you're gonna spend the 25.
Yeah.
But if you do spend, but you're gonna appropriate the 25.
Yeah.
So now I'm confused. So that's on, when you raise and appropriate the budget, you're gonna raise and appropriate 25, but you're gonna have an offset from the CPA. So why don't you reduce that amount and then have an article that raises money from the CPA administrative budget, or just, I guess you budget 5,000, whatever you budget for the CPA, they can budget up to 5% for administrative costs, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So why don't you reduce that amount of money that you know you're gonna spend, because now you're counting on money you don't have?
I don't know what the number is that I know I'm gonna spend, that's the problem.
From CPC, the time that she'll spend, we just don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of
So
as
I
needed
get
as
what
they
you're saying,
get.
but I don't know the number, so I can't.
So for that position, in FY '20, it was 21,000, and you're carrying 25,000, so isn't that just an increase right there?
No, so when we set the budget in '20, we picked a random number, because we didn't know, we were cutting cutting the position for the first time from full-time to half-time. We didn't know who we were gonna get for applicants, so we said 21,000 for a 19.5 hour-a-week position, sounds good. We ended up getting a very highly qualified candidate who also does other work for CPC. So the rate that we hired her at, based on the hours we were carrying, 21,000 for a full fiscal year is not enough to cover her. So in FY '21, we have to increase the money, even though the hours are staying the same and the rate is staying the same. We're not gonna exceed in 20, because we didn't hire her at the beginning of the fiscal year. We hired her partway through, so there's not gonna be an issue there with the.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Go for it, you can go
Oh, no,
first.
that answered it.
Oh, and I guess in my, further on the, when, you know, and I was gonna piggyback on what you said, how it's never a good year. I think this year, are you comfortable increasing some of these salaries, coupling with firing teachers? I think
Well,
that's, I think.
First of all, I look at Jay's budget and I see hiring of teachers.
I see
So
it.
maybe there's a disconnect in terms of what is actually being reduced, and without having Jay here, it's tough to have that conversation. Because I just have on page 2, you know, there's 4 non-mandated positions for 228,000 that are being added. If I added a cop, it would be adding service. If you add teachers, it wouldn't be level service, it'd be adding
But
service.
mandated meaning they have to for.
Yeah,
for-
but the 4 that are in here, there are mandated ones, but there are 2 mandated and 4 non-mandated, to total 228. So I think we need to have that, what is that? Because you had other numbers in terms of, he had a request that's higher than the 5.9%, he was asking for more than 2.1 million?
What I'm saying is Jay does his budget fundamentally different than the way that you do it. So you get all of your requests, and that gets put into your request line, and then you decide what the budget is gonna be. Jay when he made that 5.9, he had already cut a bunch out. So but he doesn't track those requests that you cut out. When he gives you that 5.9, that's him, he's already made those cuts. And this list of staffing requests for FY '20 is all of the positions that, most of them weren't filled.
For FY '20.
Yeah, so that was last year, but he didn't track that this year.
But for '21, so the ask would have been more than 2.1 million? If he didn't,
Yeah.
if he didn't sift through and make reductions.
Absolutely, but his comment to me was he doesn't live in a fantasy world. He knows sort of the range.
Yeah, it's odd you say that, because under ed reform, those department heads, those principals have to roll up their budgets untethered by management and the school committee. The school committee has to see that full request. So I'm surprised that that's the case.
He comes
Maybe you
with,
misunderstood what he said.
he comes with a realistic budget request that he had already made cuts to his budget before submitting it to you.
Okay.
And that represented his.
Well, I want to, I remember last fall, we're here and we said we have a budget deficit, and you said, don't use the word deficit because it's a shortfall of revenues. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's not use the word budget cuts, because we're not cutting the budget, we're growing the budget 4.3%. We're reducing the requested
Correct.
budget. So that's very important, because we're not cutting anything. We're not cutting anything. In some instances, we're growing. We're adding a human resources, we're adding hours in human resources, we're adding a fire chief. We're not cutting. This is not a true level services budget request. It is a request. Okay, we're not cutting anything, so let's not use the word budget cuts. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Fair enough.
Can I just ask again, why is it proposed in that column versus actuals?
This is actual?
Right, so actual in FY '20, what they actually got, and then what a 2% raise would be versus what they asked for in FY '21. You know what I mean? They could ask for more than
They
what
didn't ask for anything, it's,
Well, isn't that what
we kind of had a
proposed mean?
baseline of 2, and then we had discussions about where people are at in the spectrum of their compensation. And then we decided to make the moves upward for those particular people.
What you're looking for is actual FY '20, then what they
Yeah,
propose in
so-
'21, that's what you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
Just 'cause I'm gonna go back to that
Salaries
select
are-
board again, it doesn't reflect the $4,000 increase that, you know, you went from FY '20 to FY '21, and it makes me think other places might not be reflecting true increases.
The numbers are in the budget.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, yeah.
It says FY '20 budget 21,000, town administrative budget 25,000. So that appears to be a $4,000 increase. You're saying that's gonna be offset by the CPA?
Yes.
Some portion of it.
Portion, all right. And you don't know what that portion is. So what I think is, you take the 21,000, you increase it for whatever her cost of living adjustment is that's a union position?
Non-union.
That's not union? You increase it by 2%. And then there's an administrative line in the community preservation. They're allowed to spend 5% of their revenues on administration, which this would be, administration. So why budget it here when you're gonna charge the CPA for whatever those hours happen to be? I think that's the point you're making, Colleen. It seems to me that you should just budget the 21, and whatever she does for the CPA, you have that administrative line within the CPA appropriation. Because don't you do the buckets each year? You vote the buckets each year? There's a 5% administrative, 10% to housing, 10% to whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's how I would do that, and I would reduce that by $4,000.
Because otherwise it looks like it's either a rate increase or an hour increase, which it is
Right.
not.
That's what it looks like.
Yep.
But that's what it looks like, and I think that's Colleen's point.
Right. And I guess she's also saying that that could be appearing in other departments. And I think we do have questions on other departments, right?
There's not narrative in the budget.
There
That's-
is.
Yeah, I mean, so why don't we just cover what the narrative say for each increase?
But the narrative for that says to increase for an hourly rate of a part-time staff. So that's the narrative for that one. And you're saying that that's not what it is.
Can you just pull it up so I can see what she's reading?
55.
Oh, boy.
Line 5112?
Yes.
Yes.
Increase to account for hourly rate of part-time staff. So you're right, it's vague, but and I should expand, but what I'm trying to say, increase to account for the hourly rate of the part-time staff hired in FY '20, to account for that rate that we hired her at. Because when we set the budget in '20, we didn't have a person, right? We were reducing the staff for the first time. We picked a number, we said, we think we can get someone to do this work 19 and a half hours a week, 21,000. We got a candidate who exceeded expectations, had experience in municipal government, also worked on CPA, so we agreed to a certain rate for her, which doesn't, if she works July 1 to June 30th, doesn't fit in the $21,000.
So it's 25,000?
It's in the 25,000.
Okay, so that's not what you said, though. That's not what I heard. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. So her hourly rate at 19 and a half, so if I take a calculator and I do 25 divided by 52 divided by 19 and a half, I'll get her hourly rate.
Yes,
Okay. So 25,000 is her hourly rate.
yes, at 19 and a half hours a week.
No, $25,000 an hour.
No, I understand.
Hopefully not.
Hey, Tim, I would have
Apply.
applied for that job.
Yes,
All right, so now, okay, so her hourly rate is that 25,000, the hourly rate leads to 25,000.
Right.
So what's the CPA thing then? Is part of her 19 and a half
It'll be
hours?
offset, we just don't know how much.
We don't know how many hours she'll work for CPA throughout the fiscal year. But as we assign those costs to that, for true cost accounting purposes, to CPA, we won't spend it out of this line, and that'll have a
It'll go fund
balance.
balance.
We can guess, but I'll be in the same boat that you're arguing with revenue, that I don't want to be short in that line if she doesn't do, if I think she does 10 and she does 15, where am I?
No, I understand. Now I didn't understand what you were saying before. Now I do. So
Well,
this,
she did-
this could end up being less, but if she doesn't do any CPA work,
Right.
you're gonna need the
It'll be
25,000.
Right.
But she is on the CPC, she has a position with the CPC. And that's why she would probably do some work.
All right, let's move on. Please.
So what is Colin, what do you want? I don't know what, in terms of the pay increases, the 2% versus the actual. You get the monthly management reports, you can see where people are at in terms of that line on expense. You know, it should be 50% halfway through the year. So what are you digging to learn?
So when you say $32,000, that's all you're going above the 2%, is that based off actuals or? Like from FY '20, actuals from FY
Yeah, people who work,
'20.
with the exception of whatever we were thinking about for treasurer collector, and the human resources being a full-time position versus what it is now, the people who either work 20 hours or 19 and a half, while they work 35. So the actual is the actual, unless they had overtime, if they were an overtime employee.
No, I'm just trying to break down your $32,000 figure that you keep telling people, that you're only going above 2% for, and it comes out to $32,000. But I'm wondering if that's different, and I wanted to just know.
But I don't think, the problem is I think, within that 30, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think within that $32,000 difference, it's, some positions, I'm assuming went away, some went away. Like, I don't think it's all, I don't think every line item went up. I think some went down, so you're not gonna get what you want unless they go line by line.
Right.
And you know what I'm saying? Because you
So maybe
can't,
we should see a line by line.
you can't say that overall, people are only, if we went 2%, it would only be a $32,000 difference. You really can't say that.
But he
because-
does say that,
I understand,
so I'm
well, I
trying
know,
to- yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. You really can't say that
Well,
because
that's what the
yes,
budget would increase or decrease if you did not give them all different than, higher than 2% would cost you $32,000 more under this plan. If you get them all at 2%, you would be able to reduce $32,000 from the budget.
Speaking of that, could you go to page 77? I don't know if there's a addition problem, but you say, if you look at the department head salary, you say they're getting a 2% increase, but you're going from 84,845 to 84,605. That's not 2%, that's actually a reduction, so is that a?
That's the adjustment she just made when she sent out the.
I know, because it was at 82, but was she not making 84,000 this year?
Amy is not making 84,800 this year.
Perfect, okay. But 84,605 is gonna be her salary next year, too, current salary, okay. So we appropriated more than we paid her last year, this year.
We over appropriated for her salary.
Than what you
this
paid her.
year, yes.
Understood.
Yes.
Well, that explains why she got a reduction then, thank you. I was wondering.
Couldn't understand, I looked at her and said, whoa, she got a pay
Well, that's one
cut.
of those cases where it says it's a 2% increase, obviously it's
Yeah.
going down $200. So, yeah, our sentence said, it says the FY '20 appropriation is slightly over budgeted.
Okay. What else did you guys want to dig into?
For the human resource, can I just, I understand that you put human resource full-time. Now, is the human resource, that's not gonna be a department head, she's going to be under you, correct? Okay. I'm just wondering how that was all working, because I didn't see anything in the budget that said. So she'll be answering to you.
Yes,
Okay.
she's a human resources analyst.
Yep.
It's a non-union position.
Yep.
But it's not a department head level position. The budget talks about the tasks that she'll do and the additional things that we're not meeting now that we really need to meet and the reasons. You have specific questions about that stuff?
And I just wanted to make a comment about planning board. I know Joe put in a request for a staff planner, and I'm not suggesting that you do that because I think we can't afford to put in that new position, but I didn't quite understand when you got down to the sustainability, I can't remember what it's called, for 16,000, that conservation, the assistant planner, Concom agent would be working for 16,000 under this, what is that feasibility thing?
It's an adder for the electric aggregation. When we aggregated the electrical load for the community, we were able to charge 0.001 cent per kilowatt, which will generate about $60,000 a year, which we can use to offset administrative salaries that will help the ratepayers who are in that
Well,
program.
I understand the agri, I just didn't understand what that meant. So that 16,000, that person will be working under that. So how does that help planning board? It doesn't.
How does it help?
What do you mean help planning?
Well, I was under the impression that the assistant planner, COMCON agent, was put in place in order to assist the town planner, as well as conservation, but
And Green Communities and the electric adder.
Well, I don't think it's working that way. I know,
We think it's working that way.
well, I have some, David comes home and tells me they're way behind on minutes and that they're not getting and I'm gonna get him in trouble, they're not getting the hours from the assistant planner as they thought they were originally. So things are being delayed and they're behind on some of the decisions and stuff, and it's not quite working as well as we thought it was gonna work. And that's why I think.
It's news to me. With Joe gone, no one's brought that to my attention, but we can talk to them tomorrow.
Yeah, so
It
that
would
sounds
be
like
interesting.
a management issue. So if you could, look into that,
Yeah, yeah.
that'd be great.
Obviously, we're gonna sit down with our individual departments.
Yep.
And then, I know, Tim, I'm gonna sit down with you, with your budgets. What I would like to see, thank you very much for all the information you gave us tonight, you answered a lot of my questions. But what I would like to see is what you would do if you had $430,000 less. Where would you reduce the requested budget if you had $430,000 less? Because I really think you're off $300,000 on the marijuana and $130,000 on the grant. Obviously, 130 is easy, you just don't hire the fire chief. But where would that $300,000, if you had to reduce the requested budget by that amount, where would you take that from? I'd like to see that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have 6 different scenarios, if you will, that we can share with you. We shared them with the board last night. So if you want to see those real quick, we can
Oh,
certainly do that.
excellent.
Well, that would be good.
You've already done it. It's like I knew you were gonna have that
Yeah,
information.
I mean, because unpopular as it was 2 years ago, we did ask Nelson Park and Trust Library, they have a trust, they had an endowment, we would fund their particular requests with their own trust fund money. The highway department, we could fund their maintenance and operation line in terms of line painting, guardrail replacement, curb, gutter, certain work that's in their professional technical line with Chapter 90. Impacts there, we don't know what the number would be. Chapter 90 appropriation, generally about 549, 500,000 for a round number. So there's some of that cost in the line item for the P&T that could be offset by Chapter 90. That would be obviously a select board request to the state for those funds, so you can make that reduction there. Sanitation, there's a lot of nuance to this, right? Because we burn our trash at Wheelabrator, and we have 1.5 years left on our E.L. Harvey contract. The final year is almost $600,000 just for transportation of trash. We have bags that we sell that offset the cost almost entirely for that transportation. So you'll lose that revenue, but you lose the whole expense. So if you were to eliminate that, you could pick up $400,000. We do have a minimum burn at Wheelabrator in terms of the tonnage. We did sign a new agreement with them in 2017, so I don't know if the old language from 23 years ago survives with that minimum burn, so we're still trying to work out that detail. So we still could be on the hook for burning some trash, so what might not make sense, because you might not save as much money. Parks and Cemetery, there's 2 seasonal people that we hire every year to cut grass, paint fences, repair fences around cemeteries, headstones, and so forth. We could eliminate those 2 positions. The library positions, even though that's only the last quarter of the fiscal year, those could be 15,000. The Economic Development Coordinator, we've been back and forth on this a number of times. First, it was funded in the budget, then it was an article, then it was a budget, then it was an article, now it's back in the budget. We could fund it with an article again, and that would free up 30,000. And then the fire department, in their budget, the equipment for turnout gear for a firefighter the last 10 years, probably not a good idea to put someone in it for 10 years, but the chief's been very good at making sure that that equipment stays current and his guys are safe, so that's a $92,000 cost that's in the operating budget right now that you could fund with an article and fund with free cash.
So can you go?
Any combination thereof to get to your 360, worst case scenario.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay.
Prefer.
The 400,000, so we eliminate that, but we still owe the money? I'm confused.
Because we have a minimum burn in the original 30-year deal the town did with Wheelabrator.
Yeah.
Do you know what the cost of that is?
66.80 a ton.
So if the private haulers from
Tons a year?
Grafton, so I as a homeowner would have to hire a private hauler to take my trash,
If we eliminated trash, yes.
and they would have to take it to that place?
Wherever they take it. No, we couldn't control where Tidy Town or whoever, or BFI, whoever you contracted with takes that trash.
So we would have to go back we'd have to go back to Will Breda and negotiate out of the current contract if you were to do that 400,000?
Correct.
Okay. So I have a question, and this is probably gonna be very unpopular, and I'm probably gonna get yelled at for asking it. I'm gonna ask it anyway. You have a $1.5 million, you did a $1.5 million override back in 2014 for roads. So you spend every year $1.5 million in levy for roads, and you've done a phenomenal job with the roads. I compliment
They
you.
get better.
They're awesome. I mean, it's amazing the work that you've done. What if we were to reduce that by $500,000
Jeez, who
and
had
put
that
that into
idea?
the levy capacity? And just do $1 million worth of roads from now on? And I know it changes what you did back in 2014, and I understand that, but it's a different time now, so maybe we need to consider that? That's a political decision of the selectmen, I understand that, but
Yeah.
maybe this is the year to do that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, we've had discussions at the board level. If you were going to do an override and you wanted to save the impact to the taxpayer relative to a $1, $2, or $3 million override question, you know, can you make it more bearable by not raising to the 1.5 that's allowable? So it's an odd situation, right? You have town meeting that's the appropriating authority, allows you to spend the money, but only the select board can tell the assessors to raise that 1.5 million. So the board, even though they have an appropriation for 1.5, can tell the assessors only to raise 1 million of it through taxation, which would mean we'll pay, what's $500,000, $70 less for that year. So that would limit the impact if you did an override and kind of offset it. I'm not so sure you can just take the million and, it would take at minimum a town meeting vote.
Oh, I absolutely take
to
town
get
meeting,
the-
yeah.
do $1 million for roads and $1 million for those.
Well, $500,000.
Yeah, the $500,000 for those other things.
Is it worth having that discussion?
We've had it, I suppose everything's negotiable.
Seems to me that if we have a shortfall, there are things you want to do in your side of the budget. There are things that Jay needs to do on his side of the budget. Maybe this is the year that we say, okay, we're gonna only do $1 million worth of roads. We're gonna take that $500,000, we're gonna put it into the operating budget. It'll stay there forever. You're not gonna increase taxes more than 2.5% plus new growth this year, and you're able to maintain services. Now, $1 million worth of roads is still a pretty good chunk of roads to do, and the work that you've done has been phenomenal. I compliment you and the Highway Department and Engineering Department for the work that they've done, but now may be the time to take a look at that.
So I think we've got two opportunities. You have the working group that hopefully will get formed soon.
Yeah, we're having a hard time picking the first date.
I know, get on it.
All right.
Can I just make a comment? $1 million isn't really a lot for roads. $1.5 million is not a lot for roads since we started this. And I mean, like you just said, George Hill, it's gonna cost $4 million to do that road. By the time you get around to it, it'll be probably $100 million. But, but I mean, taking that 500 away and putting it in the operating budget and leave just $1 million, that's going to impact all the roads getting done
Oh, I understand that.
and set things back. And it was pretty controversial when we put it out there, and people were really upset because roads weren't getting done. And I'm not sure they're gonna appreciate.
Well, I guess
So
you have to
I
balance,
think
is
the
a school
idea is
teacher or a
that
road more
it's
important?
all options on the table,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I
We have to
understand that.
consider
I'm just voicing
everything.
my opinion.
No, I understand.
I completely appreciate that. I think we've got the working group to talk about that, and then we also have our TRICOM meeting. And I think that's another opportunity for us to discuss. Again, all the options should be on the table at that point in terms of what an override looks like, what the strategy should be. Hopefully, the select board will have an opportunity to have some discussions and come with some good options to that meeting. So, is there any additional discussion on the salaries that anybody wanted to have?
I just have a quick
had one question, or just what kind of a comment, because I just looked at something real quick.
Okay.
The concern, of course, was that there seemed to be a lot of unevenness in terms of, different places in the municipal side. And you mentioned the non-union staff at the schools. With two exceptions, I could not find anybody getting more than a 2% raise. So all of the admin, from the superintendent, assistant, director of finance, human resources, et cetera, are all at 2%, as is every school building principal. There were two positions I found that seemed a bit higher. My thought is they're probably people that somebody quit and they brought in the new person, and the new person demanded a higher salary. I don't know, we'd have to look into that if we thought we needed to. I just wanted to make that clear. Not sure why you thought there might have been people getting 3 or 3.5. I didn't find it. So if it's there and you think it needs to be addressed, let us know, but I didn't find it.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at those salary totals.
absolutely, and that's why I did it.
To the counterparts in the town versus the schools.
And that's why I did it. That's why
Yeah.
I went through to
They're
see, and again, I'm finding them right at 2%.
Deltas between the two.
Yep, okay, so I just want to say that. And again, if you find otherwise, then let us know, but I wasn't finding it. So that was it. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I think it's the curriculum coordinator, the 5 positions that are in there that have 3.5 next to them.
I found a SPED person, a SPED team chair with a large increase, 10.3%, and a psychologist with 6.7%. And again, Jay can tell us, it's probably people that came in new at a higher rate versus somebody who had been there.
Yeah, the account number is 2120. It's
I'd have to look.
3.09. The total cost is $469,000.
Okay. So again, just to clear that
Yeah,
up.
2.24, 2.42. There's a lot of twos. 2.72.
Yes, Colleen?
Who writes the budget statement when you go by each department? Is that from the department or is that from you guys?
The department has to give us a narrative with justification for their request, and that's what we try to fit it in. Unfortunately, you can't, with pagination and everything else in an Excel document, it's tough to make sure. Some lines do get cut off. If we don't eyeball it, we see things that the line creeps up on the bottom, and you don't get that last sentence in.
Okay.
But they do, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, department heads, right there on.
Okay.
Before he leaves, is there anybody in the audience wants to ask us anything?
Well, we're not quite done yet.
Oh, you're still doing salaries?
Unless there's additional questions on salaries, let's move on to.
Yeah, question.
All right, last
Recreation.
question.
I was a little confused by how you have an administrative personnel, this is page 210, in case you're looking. Event coordinator, you're gonna bring on, who's going to be paid using the revolving funds?
Correct.
And my question was, if you take the revolving fund money out and give it to a coordinator, how does that revolving fund get revolved? How does it get replenished?
Fees. Through programming fees for all the activities, basketball, there was a little bit of a mad rush for a summer camp, I think Monday. 15 minutes sold out, $107,000 worth of revenue.
Huh.
So we just don't, we have a lot of programming for really 2 people in that department. So those revolving fees for all programs that we do, from swimming, beach, basketball is the most profitable one. Those fees will be used to, they'll always be replenished because we always have balances that we turn back to the general fund.
Okay, so some of the money is not technically needed, it's going to continue flowing into the revolving funds to run all of those other programs. You're just bringing on some of that money out for a coordinator.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, moving on. In the expenses and other area, we had a question about the travel budget under the town administrator.
Yeah, the $8,000, is that for both of you for travel and conferences?
I don't know, can you bring up the line? It probably is. In my contract, there is a stipend for travel. And then if there's more money than what that is, then it would be for other people who would travel. We are bringing the fleet on as the full Crown Vics roll out. They're expensive to maintain, we just let those go. But as better automobiles come up from the police department, we put those in service for admin vehicles. A lot of them we have now don't have back seats, so it's difficult to do anything meaningful with a group to travel to a class or to anything else. But I think we have one administrative vehicle that can be used just for that
Like a
purpose
pool
now.
car?
Yeah.
All right, we're almost there, Tim. The
Take your time.
next question was about health insurance. So we had a kind of unexpected surprise this year with relatively flat growth. And obviously that money's being used to fund parts of the budget. Kind of what's the long-term plan if next year that returns back to 6 or 8% or whatever our historical norms are?
Well, in our projections that we have, that's growing at 5 or 6% anyways going out. So if it comes back, we avoided a cost for 1 year, and we'll have to deal with that increase in year 2.
Yeah, because you're taking whatever that 5% that you had projected for this year. Peter asked that question the other day.
Yeah.
You had 5 or 6% increase for this year. It's 0. You increase it 1% or something for.
1.5% increase
Yeah.
for what is realistic.
So then, that money now is being absorbed in other parts of the operating budget. So now next year, you're gonna be growing by the same amount of money plus whatever increases in health insurance.
Yep.
I think that was Peter's point the other day, so it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah,
How long is our contract with Harvard Pilgrim?
we do 1 year renewal.
Oh, it's a one-year contract?
So we threatened to shop ahead of getting all of loss runs in, so I'm gonna say that's why we got the rate we got.
We're healthy.
Yeah,
Good.
we don't have any major losses, and of course, we have stopgap insurance, so when anything gets over 75,000, we have built-in pieces to reinsure.
Excellent. All right, there was a question about the engineering expenses. There's a.
Yeah, that was my question. So you increase the engineering budget by $46,000 for the MS4 permit. Exactly what is that $46,000? That's gonna cover everything having to do with the MS4 permit?
Yeah, all the monitoring, all the reporting the VHB is gonna do is covered inside that number.
All right, so what if is there a budget for the catch basin cleaning that has to happen and all that other stuff?
We
That's
do
already
that
in the
separate,
budget?
that's inside of the operating budget.
Okay,
for
so
the
you only have to spend $46,000 on an MS4?
Yeah, but there's things, because it's a 10-year permit, so whatever they, EPA or DEP will let you put off into year 2 or year 3, we're doing the year 1 stuff with that 46,000.
Okay, because just to let you know, what we've done in Groton is I appointed a committee and we hired in a consultant. And we're looking at adding a fee
Yeah.
to create an enterprise fund.
Yep.
Because we're estimating our annual expense to be about $250,000 a year for the implementation. So it's a lot of, so when I saw the 46, I was just thinking to myself,
No, we do need a fee to offset those costs, there's no doubt about it.
yeah.
But you took town meeting approval to get that.
Well, we're gonna go to this spring's town meeting
Yeah.
to do it. Well, absolutely, wouldn't do it without town meeting.
I don't think Grafton folks know enough about it yet to say we should move forward. Shrewsbury's had it in effect for 12 years, collecting,
Really?
yeah. And so they have a lot of money, so they can do a lot more, but they have staff too, so they
Yeah.
fund those staff positions to do those particular
You
projects.
do all your stuff with the highway guys, right?
Yeah, for the maintenance of
Maybe for the catch
of the
basin and
cleaning
all that.
catch basin, yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Sure. All right. Last question is surrounding the override. So the last meeting that we had with you had a strong message that the town had kind of exhausted all of his options, that you had done some analysis and felt that, Grafton was positioned to be able to afford an override. We haven't really had much steer, I guess, since then. So
Much what, I'm sorry?
steer, like
Okay.
a kind of updates, and the committee would love to hear what your current thinking is and what the direction is, what the next steps are, and, we're trying very hard to keep up with what's been happening in town and with all of the various meetings and budget changes that have happened, and trying to align ourselves with what the budget and override potential strategy is. So we'd just love to get an update with what's happening.
Well, widely misquoted in terms of being able to, everybody that can afford an override, right? I prefaced that statement 4 times with, we would increase overlay and abatements, doubling that number to take care of the neediest people in this community. You have 12% of your student population that's on reduced or free lunch programs, so we realize that people are impoverished in Grafton. We have to protect those people. So I prefaced every time I talked about us having $1 billion in filed income tax collectively, for the 20,000 people who live here, we send 50 million to Boston, we get 12 million back. That's a problem. There's an inequity there, but you gotta run the state too, so they get the lion's share of it, we get the 12 million bucks to do education and to do other various programs from Chapter 90 to, Chapter 90 is funded with the gas tax, but, you know, the unrestricted local aid of $1 million, $1.2 million, whatever that number is, that comes back to us, but we send way more out. So in terms of as we compare to other communities from a single-family house value and a single-family taxpayer or payment versus income, we are poised to be able, we have more elasticity than those other communities who earn less.
Sure.
So,
I guess the message that we got from that was, we've done some analysis, and this is an override year. And then tonight, what we got was a question of, is this an override year? So we're getting mixed signals in terms of what the strategy is. Are we in an override year or not? To your point, we don't have an opinion on that. We're only here to advise on the town meeting if there is an override option. So some more clarity and kind of strategy around what the budget is going to look like and what our options are would be appreciated.
I shared with you on the 20th of January the fact as we see them for what the need is to get you through 5 years robustly. That's a $6.5 million override. Doesn't mean you're gonna spend all of it at once, just like you didn't spend all of it in 2015 through 20. So that's what the proposal was. It's up to the leadership, which is the board, and I'm not punting back to them, but they need to decide, A, what people's real tolerance is for how much that's going to be, because it's not gonna be 6.5, so what is the number? So we all can agree, we just don't have enough money, I think. You know, we might have some suspicion that things aren't budgeted correctly and we favor people over other people. So if you back that out and you look at the cost drivers across the board, the things external from us, health insurance, which we got lucky this year, state aid that is growing at a minimum 1%, the growth in those larger budgets can't be sustained. So I think the board on the 3rd or the 4th, whatever date you corrected me on for the TRICOM meeting, will have a discussion about, do we put it on in May and how much will it be for? That's what I think will happen.
Are you aware of what the process is that is going to be undertaken to understand, you know, that tolerance? Do you know?
I think it's gonna be anecdotal, just like it was in 14. What they're gonna hear at the grocery store about how much people can afford or are willing to afford. Because we made up a number of what we thought would get passed in 14. Because it was higher even in early documentations from Jay and I making a recommendation, it was higher. So, you know, the leadership of the community, it's a lightning rod, popularly elected people know their constituency and they're gonna tell them what they're willing to do. And I hope they get to the number that satisfies us all and satisfies the taxpayer.
So I guess this isn't for you, but, I mean, generally, I feel like when we make big decisions as a town, we're usually pretty good at getting community feedback, particularly when it comes to spending money and taxes and all of that. And just as a general comment, it seems odd to me that we would be proposing to increase taxes without checking in with people. And that's not necessarily for you, Tim, but for me personally, I'd love to see, you know, when we go to do a big project, right, that's going to impact people's taxes. We do a lot of community outreach.
Yeah.
It seems absent to me, personally.
Well, we don't know the number. How could we do that? And we know that every $1 million you raise costs you every $1 million you raise through taxes costs $151 on average based on values. So if you want to have a discussion about 1 million, you talk about the average payer paying $150 more, 2 million, $352. I mean.
But isn't it your responsibility to come up with that number?
No.
So
I
Tim
came up
put
with the
some
number
Tim
on the
put some
20th of
options on
January,
the
at
table.
$6.5 million.
Wait a minute,
Then who decides
who
the number?
decides?
The select board decides.
Yes.
But wouldn't they need your input? I mean, they
And
can't.
I meet with them once a week. I think they have my input relative to everything I
when
just shared
you're-
with you.
So
I
we
think
have,
they
we
have
have
to
some
make
options on
they
the
have
table.
to make a judgment
right?
on the budget. That's what it is.
That's right.
Tim submitted a budget. Jay submits a budget. You can see what all the department heads asked for. You can see what they got. You can see where the salaries are going, to your point, over 5 years, and that they have to make the call from there.
But to me, you know, how do we do it? Is we do it like every other big project in town, which is you outline what the costs are and what the value or benefit is that people are gonna get, and you ask for input. And then you get a gauge of whether you know, in terms of that tolerance level, instead of just finger in the air, we have an actual indication by, again, this isn't for you, it just seems odd to me that we're in a year where there's a bunch of options that are on the table, that you put on the table, and there's been no community engagement to suss out people's tolerance and desire for the services and, you know, and benefits that those options outline. It's just, it seems weird to me that as a town, we're sort of careening into this discussion on, this tri-board discussion without any substantive community engagement. I don't, am I wrong?
Nope.
It just seems, it's just, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone with this.
I think because, I mean, I worked on I helped, you know, it was very much a grassroots campaign in 2014, and we went door to door, but we had a number, I think, and we had a reason behind it. I think that's where I'm getting lost, is that we don't have a number. I know why we need the money, but we don't have the figure. So to actually speak about it, it can't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the quick math I did last night, based on where the schools are now at the 590 for the delta from where they're at to where they want to be for the 2.1, the marijuana money and the 130 for the chief, it's $1,090,000. At a minimum, that's what you need if you want to get to fiscal '21.
And that takes out capital?
Yeah, that's just to operate the budget.
Okay. And for just 1 year?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Correct. If it was not 1 year, it'd be 6.5 million.
Including capital.
Yes.
Which is fine.
I think that answers the question.
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to focus on, the 5th, whenever that tri-board meeting is. Do we do 1,090,000 to get us through 21 and pray that all this other stuff happens in 22, the marijuana money and the growth and the development to help build more growth into the operating budget? Or do we go for a 5-year override? I think that's the discussion we have on the 5th. I think
agree.
Tim has given it.
Yeah,
I agree.
that's exactly right.
And we have the discussion with $1 million for capital as well.
I was
Yeah.
just gonna
Look
say.
at
That's
That's
in the,
why
that's in the
this is
6.5.
This
Yeah.
doesn't even
Yeah.
include
Yeah.
capital.
This was good. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, since I have a captive audience, I will tell you that there are states in the Midwest that look at local option income taxes as a more progressive way to tax people. And I would argue the math that I've done, the 150 for the million, we send a billion in terms of filed income taxes. If we had 0.008 of that retained for the school district, it's $1 million. So that would be a better way, in my mind, for the people who have kids in school today to pay $60 a year for that million versus 150 on average for a single-family tax bill. Take legislative approval, take town meeting vote, it would take a ballot question, but it sounds a lot better to me to pay $60 based on I don't know if I did it on a $100,000 a year salary or $75,000 a year salary for that 0.00% than a regressive tax like property tax, where the people who have been here that are over 65, that are income eligible or are on fixed incomes, they won't bear that cost. And the cost will be borne by the people who should rightly bear that cost, the people who have kids in schools, which is me, and I should pay that.
Does anybody in Massachusetts do that?
No.
So we'd be the leaders?
Yeah, it's not legal in
Well, the
Massachusetts.
legislature would have to approve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
got, there's a legislative process that it has to go through.
Right,
We gotta
right.
write a bill.
Yeah.
We gotta, just like the override, you gotta be in lockstep with these kind of concepts, but that's a much better, you know, in terms of community engagement, we had tax bills go out on the 31st. We have thousands of people to come in the building instead of mailing in a tax. I don't see thousands, but I see hundreds of people that pay their bills and talk to me about their bills and their taxes and what they can do. So I have a direct knowledge of people that just don't want to pay more in taxes.
Sure.
So if we can find a way to offset that, much like the energy aggregation piece, which we don't talk enough about, that energy aggregation piece saved people $2.2 million, aggregate through the whole town. Can we argue, hey, we saved you 2.2, but, you know, can we get another $30 a year out of you for an override? Because we just saved you $30 a month for the past 3 years, compared to the National Grid rate. You know, we're trying to add value at every turn for the taxpayer. It's time we all knew that those things happen every day.
Well, I think the idea is good, but you're gonna have to sit down with our legislators and have them write the bill, and then it's gonna take a good couple of years, I suppose, to get, if it gets passed. But right now, that's not gonna save our,
Yeah,
solve our
that
issue.
doesn't help us this year.
No.
I think
I
the
would
other
love if
thing.
we did that, but it's
Well, I
gonna
think
take
it's
years.
something that we shouldn't just totally dismiss. I mean, if we end up with an override, we can always look to future years to do this, you know? But I wouldn't totally dismiss it. I think it's kind of a good idea, but getting it through legislature is gonna be a lot of work.
Well, and you've changed the paradigm, right?
Right,
So
we have changed the
from,
paradigm.
you know, your taxes don't really cover your own kids' education. It's a community that provides a service to educate the kids. And although the seniors don't have kids in school, they got other people paying for them to go to school and their kids to go to school and whatnot. And so now you're sort of flipping that whole paradigm. I don't know.
Well, it's.
Well,
It's an
seniors would
interesting-
still be paying, but it would be proportional to their income rather than proportional
Right.
to the home that they've been living in for, you know, probably for a lot of them decades. So I think that would be, they would still be contributing to the schools, but it would be, it's something they can, you know, more of them can afford.
Be worth
As long as income
considering.
levels stay at where they're at, for the people, for the majority of people who live in Grafton, you're fine. But you won't be relying on an override
Right.
to satisfy that. You put the onus where it belongs. People who have kids in schools.
Okay. Is there any public comments after the workshop? Anybody? Come on, somebody wants to get up and talk.
I know Bruce does, he's dying.
No? All right. So, Tim, I had requested to add a column to the proposed budget sheet. So what we actually wanted was a number, a slot where we could put a number that we would recommend, rather than just a yes, no, if that's all right.
Is that what the charter calls for? In terms of you make a recommendation on a number?
It is, yeah. So the charter basically says, when we go to town meeting, the first proposal comes from Finance Committee, if it wants to do that.
Yeah, when a proposal comes forward, you're the first one to comment.
The proposal would come from us. So there would be a budget amendment that would come from Finance Committee first to be discussed. That-
So you want enough room to write a different number in there that's there?
Yeah, well, presumably it would be the same. So as I said in our conversation, you know, it's our goal to be in line, and it would indicate, again, in this, particularly in this override year, Finance Committee feels like it's really important to make sure that Finance Committee, School Committee, and the Select Board all go to town meeting as a unified group. So it would be a strong indicator that we are in alignment with what's being proposed in the budget. So that's the intention behind it.
So if those numbers are different, who makes the budget presentation?
According to the charter, you do.
Yep.
But if they're not my numbers, how do I make that
Well,
presentation?
you present the budget, hopefully, I think what you're saying is we want to come in unified with whatever you
Yeah,
present.
what if you're not? I just want to know the
Well, then
pragmatic
you present the
logistics.
budget and we get up and amend it.
Okay.
That's how it would work. That's what the charter says.
Yep.
The charter says you present it, we get the first crack at amending it. I hope we don't do that.
Okay.
Yep, that's not the
So
intention.
did we give them that document yet?
Yeah, it's an Excel document, so I can modify it for you, or you can modify it, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Do you need us while you're here to vote to deficit spend, snow and ice?
Not a requirement under the Municipal
Oh, that's right, you do it.
Modernization Act. So
That's right.
you don't have to, but you've done it historically just to do it, just to give transparency for the 42,000 we're over right now, and an impending storm coming in the next 2 days, hopefully.
So moved then. If you want full transparency?
I was about to say so moved.
Someone should
Second.
make a motion for the total.
I move that we deficit spend snow and ice.
Deficit spend or something.
So there's specific language for that?
Second?
Do we need that?
I seconded.
Sue will put it in the motion.
Yeah.
Sue makes us look good.
The
Right, Sue?
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Tim, thanks for your time tonight. Rebecca, thank you for your time.
Before you take off, Tim, can I
Thanks,
just
Tim.
confirm April 4th and April 23rd?
And we can forward questions to you, then to forward to him, that we still have.
Yeah, absolutely. And of
Okay.
course, we'll have all of our department reviews as well.
Actually, send them, I meet with Tim. Pauline and I are gonna meet with Tim to go over those budgets. If you have specific questions, send them to me, and then I'll sit down with Tim when we set
I'm
the
just
meeting.
talking about generally, to the whole budget, if we have any questions. we can-
We usually cover the whole budget when we talk, don't we?
Hey, you're a liaison to me for the departments. I mean, we have a block of them, but you would talk to the police department about the police department, not necessarily me, so
That's okay, I can send them, I can do that. It's
All right,
fine.
well, I'd like to be copied on everything, so
Oh,
that's
I'll-
fine.
I'll send it to you so you can forward it to them. We'll do the process right.
All right,
All
thank
I
right.
you.
did not mean to step on the chair's toes, and I
No,
apologize.
thank you. All right, so,
clarify, you're asking me about dates for, are they Saturday dates? What do we,
so Sue, these are both Saturdays, right, for the 4th and the 23rd?
Fourth is a Saturday and April 23rd is a Thursday evening for public hearing, town warrant.
Did-
if I already said yes to you, then it's a yes, but if I didn't say that, I'll get back to you to confirm that that's right.
Okay, are those confirmed, Sue?
April 4th was,
Okay.
April 23rd was.
Okay, great. Tim Beckett, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. So we have a meeting schedule that needs to be reviewed. That's in the packet.
Didn't we already approve it?
Didn't we already approve this?
Thank you. I thought we did.
We just added the March 5th date. Are you looking at the general meeting schedule?
Yes,
Yep, it's just there.
just that when
to
it
make
was added.
sure
Okay.
We have a quorum.
I'll be here
every
that
night
night.
And, or every day, and all our ducks are in a row.
Okay.
Is that going to be in
is it this
room A?
page?
Yeah, it's not on this
I don't see much
page.
fit on it.
Will the tri-committee be in this room, or
March, I don't.
they
know
haven't
that
said?
yet.
Okay,
It's not, it's on, you're looking at the wrong schedule. It's
it's this schedule.
yeah, it's that one.
Okay.
Oh, okay, all right, yep, different document.
So that's the only one, but, do you know when you,
No, I don't know the location, but when they posted, you get the automatic email blast that they do when they post a meeting anyways, right? So we can sign up on the web.
It's in this doc.
We can get it to you anyways, but you can do it so it's automatic. But I do not know the location.
Night, Tim.
Thank you.
I'll find it. Oh, there it is.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, almost there. So we
I'm
have
burnt
a,
out.
I know, I'm burnt out myself. We've got a March 5th proposed TRICOM meeting. It's, we've had a request to reschedule that, Laura, so, or potentially put it back a little bit. The Democratic caucus is meeting that night, and it's on the schedule.
Plenty of time.
Well-
Absolutely, we should push it back more.
So it's not a suggestion to push it back, but I've had a request to reschedule, so I'll send you an email on that, and we'll either make it work or we won't. Let's see, what else do we have? So we went over the snow and ice budget. And I
Yeah,
think,
can I just, Sue, on the Saturday departments that are meeting with us on Saturday morning, you've listed down who's in charge of which departments. Dan was with me for the police department, not Matt. Matt's with me for the fire.
yeah,
think I went to both last year.
Did you, all right.
So behind the schedule are the department assignments, so can
Yep.
everybody just review those and
Yeah, make sure I didn't.
Yeah, mine are right.
please?
Thank you, Sue.
What am I signed to? Right there. They are?
And with that, so Sue was kind enough to put together a document, a list of questions. So I'd like to take a, systematic approach to having our discussions, and I'd like everybody to kind of make sure that they cover that list of questions and concerns with their budget holders, and then get their feedback from those meetings back, so that the whole committee can see those. So let's make sure, I'll get Sue to send that out.
Did you add anything to those? Because I didn't send it out to anybody else because I thought maybe you'd add something.
I didn't. To be totally candid, haven't had a lot of time.
Okay. The only thing I would add, Sue, is that they should look at the actuals.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'll review that with Sue. We
Okay.
may make some minor
Okay.
amendments to that, but we'll get that out over the next few days, so that everybody will have a baseline
So we should start
process.
scheduling those meetings now.
I would say we're in a position to start scheduling those meetings, yep.
These are the questions that they want to.
Okay. What else do we have? My eyes are just going.
No, Matthew.
Turnbacks, look at turnbacks too, Sue.
Look at actuals and term.
Have me with the accountant also.
It is on there, okay, good.
That is what I've got next.
Yeah, okay, so,
Treasurer collector.
You said you wanted to come to that one, right?
Yeah.
Your correspondence with select board and
yeah,
review of
I
that.
don't think that I've had any
Yes.
correspondence
Yeah,
lately with
I
select
got
board,
that.
so.
And you
we'll
you
just
sent
move
that,
on.
yeah.
I just want everyone to make sure that that's noted, that they look at the actuals.
All right, so, Sue, put together, did that get out to everybody, the OPEB language?
Yes.
Yeah, I did,
Yes.
I
Did
did.
everyone review that? I thought it looked great.
I thought it was
Yes, it
great.
does.
I agree.
Okay, so,
I thought we voted on that the last time.
This is in addition to the policy, and I think it needs to be voted
Oh,
on.
then I move that we amend the OPEB policy as drafted by Sue,
Financial management policy.
financial management policy
Second.
on OPEB.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So this can be sent to the select board, so they can read it, and then they have to vote on it.
I will do that.
Okay.
Yep, very good. Okay, let's see. Let's do minutes, if that's all right. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
For April 4th,
Is it January
January.
For
22nd?
minutes of January 22nd.
2nd, okay.
Motion
Second?
and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let's see, we should, because we haven't, have a quick discussion on the CIPC bylaw subcommittee. Can someone refresh me on who's on that?
I think
I
me
know
and
I am.
Dan and you are.
So what is the,
You want it?
I haven't actually talked to anybody about that. My feeling is that maybe this isn't the year to go to town meeting with a bylaw around CIPC.
Well, maybe because it didn't pass in the fall, and obviously come back the next spring. Maybe you want to let it wait till the fall? Is that what you're saying?
So it's not something that I want to drop.
No.
Because I think it's really important.
I agree.
But we've got some conversation going, and obviously there is potential override money coming for that as well. So I think, if it's included in an override, that makes it more important than ever that we have a good long-term plan. But,
And you could bring it in fall too.
yeah, we
if
can
you're
bring it in the
ready.
fall. That was my thinking, is that we
Yeah.
have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
If we have an override put on the table, we're gonna have 2 budgets to review. I just don't know that necessarily we're gonna have the time and energy to put into that, and
Well,
it's not
that'll
a,
give you more time to work on
I
it.
think we should focus on the budget, you're right. And the
Yeah.
fall, I'm not saying, I didn't mean to say drop it, I said bring it back on the fall.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fine. So I don't think we have to take a vote on that. We've
Right.
formed the subcommittee. There's no
Right.
additional actions to take on that. We'll table that until after we get through the budget process. Colleen, did you have any commentary on the
Tomorrow's will not meet.
Tim's capital budget that he submitted
Or really not?
that you wanted to share?
Yes, but CIPC is gonna meet next week, so I just wanna meet with everybody first and make sure we're all on the same page before I speak on it.
Okay.
Out of turn.
Then we'll just table that conversation. Fine. That's all I had. Any updates from anybody? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.